Hello friends, my name is Koolio and welcome back to the channel. Today guys, I want to share with you a special video. This is a character build video, kind of a guide for LANGRISSER M. Now, the English release for the game will be coming out pretty soon, and so I decided I wanted to put together a list of a couple of videos going towards the future on how to build specific characters, at least what I think will be the best builds for them once the game officially launches. Now, all the information that I have on here is available on their main website. They finally went ahead and updated a whole bunch of information on there. And one of the reasons why I picked Bozel, the hero, for this video is I wanted to correct some misinformation I had placed in the my top 10 heroes about specifically about his town. So let's go ahead, we're gonna jump into this video, talk about what builds I think are best for Bozel going towards the future. Now remember, when the game officially launches, once players get their hands on it, we'll probably be able to come across more specific builds. Things might change too with updates towards the future, so just keep that in mind as well. So starting off first, let's go ahead and explain his town a little bit better. Now it is called Millennial Evil. And what happens is Bozel will replace his intellect stat with 1.5 times his magical defense. So specifically what that means is the higher the magical defense is, the higher his intellect will be. And so when you're going through and trying to focus on building Bozel, you want to focus, because he's a really heavy damage dealer, to try to build up his magical defense along with his intellect, because that's a really big boost on top of his intellect. However, do keep in mind it replaces his intellect, so if you're really going to try to focus on him specifically damage-wise, magical defense is probably the best way to go, because it's going to give you most likely the best damage stats coming out of there for intellect, as well as it gives him some defense as well from magical attacks. Now, along with that is after he deals damage, he has a 100% chance to deal a random debuff. Now, we don't know exactly what the debuffs are yet, but once they are officially released, we'll be able to take a deeper look at them to be able to see which debuffs you're going to probably want to afflict onto the enemy. So let's go ahead and start off first and talk about his class system, his skills, and his soldiers, and what I think is going to be the best path to go through, what I think are going to be the best soldiers, the best skills, as well as what are the best equipment items for him. So he starts off as a mage hero with two abilities, one called Sleep, which is a magic damaging ability that directly deals 0.25 damage to a single enemy and dispels 3 buffs. However, this is a debuff on the enemy, and the enemy cannot move the next turn, as well as this debuff cannot be dispelled. Now keep that in mind, because there's some abilities towards the future later in this video that I want to talk about that don't have that cannot be dispelled ability. So dispels 3 debuffs as well as putting him asleep, and because you're doing magical damage, you can also apply a random debuff on top of that. Now, the other ability he has is called Fireball, which does magical damage, allows him to attack a single enemy, and deals 1.5 damage with bonus damage when attacking infantry. So you're going to want to keep him, you want him kind of in the fray, but not too close, because his physical defense is going to be kind of weak, but at least it gives him a chance to take down some enemies before they attack him. Now, the soldiers that unlock right off the bat is just the basic Warlock class. That just does basic normal attack damage as magical damage. However, don't set these guys aside just yet, because they do have the highest magical defense out of any of the other soldiers in his arsenal. So if you're really pushing towards a magical defense, you could consider this one for replacements of other ones if you don't have them just yet. But there are much better soldiers in the future. But do keep in mind he does have the highest magical defense. However, there are some soldiers later down the line that are definitely way better. But the Warlock could be a good replacement for some other soldiers if you don't have the higher tier ones unlocked just yet. So, going into the next class the class tree system, I believe the best route to go is the Reaper class. Specifically, you're going towards damage and PvP. Now, once you unlock the Reaper class, it unlocks the ability Decay, which is another active ability that does magical damage and allows them to attack multiple enemies within range and deals 0.3 times area of effect damage. However, it also prevents any of those enemies from receiving buffs. Now, his previous abilities dispelled any buffs, but then this one also on top of that, because you've pretty much gotten rid of any buffs that they've had on it, but it also prevents them from receiving any buffs towards the future for the next 2 turns. On top of that, the 2 soldiers that he unlocks is the Skeleton Warrior Soldier, which does have a resurrection ability. Now, when the soldier's HP is 0 and Bozel is initiated in combat, he does restore 15% HP just to the Skeleton Warriors, not to Bozel, allowing them to kind of come back, giving him a little bit more defense, a little bit more HP on top of that. And then his other soldier is called the Thaumaturge. Now with this one, the skill ability is normal attacks deal magical damage, and when you initiate combat, when initiating combat, attack is increased by 20%. I believe initiating combats for both the Skeleton Warrior and Thaumaturge, not when someone initiates combat on Bozel. Now the next skill line to go down obviously is the Death Lord. You don't have any other options, but the Death Lord is when things start to really crank it up. Now for the skill abilities for this is where Bozel really begins to shine, because he receives a new passive ability called Seal. Now when he deals damage to an enemy for an ability, an attack, whatever, there is a 50% chance to deact enemies' active skills. And this is a really big deal, especially in PvP, and is a really powerful move against healing units, against clerics and stuff like that, because if their enemy, they've got defensive units and attacker units and stuff that are getting low on health, if you can neutralize their healing units, getting rid of buffs, debuffing them, as well as knocking off their active abilities, you're going to begin to really dominate the battlefield, and it's going to be really hard for the enemy to come back from that. And then his ultimate, kind of like his strongest ability, is Black Hole, which does magical damage, attacks multiple enemies within range, and deals 0.36 times area of effect damage, and deals 2 random debuffs to each troop. Now, that's on top of the random debuffs that you've already applied to the character. So you are constantly debuffing, making it so it's impossible for them to buff them up, as well as deactivating skills. Bozel is going to be an incredibly powerful hero to obtain, and he's probably going to be the one I'm going to try to roll for first, because I kind of want him in PvP, but he can also be useful taking on certain trials and dungeons and things like that. So let's go ahead and actually talk about, we need to talk about his soldiers too, because this is where a lot of his magical defense is going to come from. Now he's got armed skeletons and wizards. Now the armed skeletons does have that same resurrection ability as the one before. However, this time, if you are specifically attacked, you get an increased defense of 10%, which is good to try to keep yourself alive. However, I highly recommend doing the wizard, because with the wizard, not only do you do magical damage, but your attack and magical defense are increased by 30%. So not only is your magical defense increasing, but that's also increasing your intellect when it gets replaced, as well as increasing your attack. You're going to be doing an insane amount of damage on top of all the debuffs and stuff that Bozel's already applying. Now that we've talked about the path line and the skills and the soldiers that I believe are the best to equip, let's go ahead and talk about the weapons. Now the first one I want to talk about is called Astaroth. Now this one has an ability called Poison Fog. When battling enemies afflicted with debuffs, which if you are playing Bozel correctly, there are going to be tons of debuffs, his intellect is increased by 3%. So not only are you getting increased damage as well going up against these characters with debuffs, but also when initiating combat, there is a 15% chance to stun the enemy after the battle, and it lasts for 1 turn. So not only are you debuffing them, damaging them, but there's a chance that you can also stop them in their tracks from attacking you back, just making you like a wave of absolute destruction. The next one is called the Dark Robe Armor. With this one, its special ability is called the Devil Inside. Now he gets an increase of HP by 1%, but how on top of that, when attacked by range attacks, so if you've got archers or other mages attacking you, his defense and magical defense are increased by 3%. The reason why I put that on there is I believe the effect goes away after, it's only when you're attacked. However, I believe that defense and magical defense on top of that is a really big key, because you might have mages or rangers that might attack you from a distance, so you're going to want to be careful of those. Plus this gives them just a little bit of HP and a little bit of defense on top of that, so I think that's a really good stat to have. Now the next one is just a basic Dark Crown. With this one, it just gives them a basic magical defense increase of 2% and an HP increase of 1%. Plus, it's got like a base stat of magical defense of 3%. So overall, the reason why I would pick this one: increased magical defense, increased intellect, increased damage. And then for the last one is the Dimensional Jewel. Now this one is going to cause some serious headache. If you can get this item, you're going to cause some major damage. Now, his intellect is increased by 1.5%, and when he's actively dealing skill damage, which is what you're most likely going to be doing, attacking enemies as constantly as you can, there is a 15% chance to reduce his cooldown by 1%. So some of those active abilities, if you can reduce the cooldown of those abilities and you're attacking, you're going to be just wiping the floor, debuffing everybody, doing serious damage, stunning them, putting them to sleep. It gets absolutely crazy. So if you can get your hands on a Dimensional Jewel, that would probably be the first item I would recommend trying to obtain for Bozel, mainly due to that 15% chance to reduce his cooldown by 1%. Because with that, you're going to be pretty much unstoppable, and the enemy's going to be stopped in their tracks. So, well guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more LANGRISSER M videos coming in the future. And if you guys like this type of content, talking about builds and stuff, let me know down below. Let me know your guys' thoughts on this build. If you guys have seen the stats and stuff, let me know what you think would be the best build for Bozel, and then let me know which hero you guys want to see next on this build list on how I feel like they should be built when the English version's released. Well guys, I'll see you next time.